Trump's team thought it was just another hearing, until Crockett pulled out a folder, opened it, and read something that might send legal shockwaves through his legacy. The room was colder than it looked on screen. Not freezing, but cold enough that you'd notice if you weren't too busy thinking about what you were about to say on live television. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat still, hands folded neatly on the desk in front of her, waiting for her cue. Her team had been prepping her for days, but this wasn't about notes. It wasn't even about performance. This was about truth. The House Oversight Committee hearing was already dragging into its second hour. Most of the room had fallen into that familiar rhythm: rehearsed statements, party line questioning, the usual sideways glances. Crockett had listened to it all. She had nodded when she needed to, responded when prompted, and kept a calm expression even as some of her colleagues drifted into their talking points like they were checking off boxes on a list. But Jasmine wasn't there for that. She had something different planned. Across from her sat Congressman Harland Wexler, a longtime Trump loyalist from Oklahoma. He'd been combative all morning, throwing his weight behind vague claims and sharp barbs, clearly trying to put on a show. Jasmine let him finish his statement, then waited for the gavel to swing her way. "Congresswoman Crockett, you have 5 minutes," came the chair's voice. She didn't hesitate. "Thank you," Jasmine said. Her voice was steady. No theatrics, just presence. She looked directly into the camera for a brief second before dropping her gaze to the folder in front of her. Then she opened it. "I'd like to submit to the record a series of documents obtained via subpoena last month," she began. "These include financial ledgers, international wire records, and internal memos from the Trump Organization during the years 2017 through 2020. There was a slight pause in the room. No one expected her to start with that. Jasmine glanced across the committee. She wasn't looking for approval, she just wanted their attention. These documents, confirmed authentic by an independent forensic audit, include transactions between Mr. Trump's companies and a private banking entity based in the United Arab Emirates. I'm not here to speculate. I'm simply going to read what the record shows." One of the Republican aides sitting behind the committee members started typing faster. Harland Wexler leaned forward, arms crossed tight. He was trying to mask it, but his interest was obvious now. Jasmine flipped to the first highlighted page. February 12th, 2018, $325 million wired from Gulf Strategic Holdings to a shell company registered in Delaware under the name Bayfield Assets. Ownership of Bayfield Assets is tied to Eric Trump, but correspondence dated just days before the transaction show explicit authorization from Donald J. Trump, then President of the United States. There it was. She wasn't accusing. She was reading. Another pause, then a few muffled coughs. Chairs creaked. The cameras didn't move, but the air in the room did. Jasmine kept going. This money trail and others like it were not disclosed during the president's financial disclosure filings, nor were they mentioned during sworn testimony from his former CFO last year. She took a breath. And I'd like to remind everyone here that lying under oath is still a federal offense. Somewhere behind her, a staffer cleared their throat. The sound was quiet, but sharp. Crockett looked back up. "I'm not saying this out of political interest. I'm saying this because the integrity of our government is not a reality TV show. It doesn't work if we pretend we don't see what's right in front of us." The hearing chair, an older congressman from Oregon, shifted uncomfortably but didn't interrupt. Maybe he didn't expect this either. Or maybe he was just letting it happen. Harland Wexler, who had been fiddling with his pen, finally spoke. "Congresswoman, are you implying that the former president—" "I'm not implying anything, Congressman," she interrupted, not with anger but with precision. "I'm providing receipts, and I have more." Then she picked up a second folder, thicker than the first. This folder includes communication records between Mr. Trump and 2 foreign business partners, one of whom was under investigation for money laundering during the exact period these transfers occurred. Gasps? No, but a few eyes definitely widened. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't need to. She ended her statement quietly. "I'll yield my time, but I encourage my colleagues to read what's been submitted before continuing this hearing as if nothing happened." The room stayed quiet for several seconds longer than usual, but while that hearing room was holding its breath, someone hundreds of miles away was already losing it. Donald Trump had a habit of watching things live, even when his advisors begged him not to. That morning was no different. He was in the gold-trimmed library at his Bedminster Club, a phone in one hand, a Diet Coke in the other. 3 flat screens were mounted on the wall, all tuned to different networks covering the oversight hearing. His expression shifted the moment Jasmine Crockett started reading. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Two aides were with him, both young, both nervous. They didn't answer. They knew better. Trump stared at the screen, jaw tightening. "Who gave her that? Who gave her that?" He threw the remote onto the table. The aide closest to the TV tried to spin it. "It's nothing new, sir. Just political theater. She's trying to score clips for social media." But Trump wasn't buying it. "No, no. Those are bank records. That's real stuff. Where the hell did she get that?" On screen, Crockett was calm, clear, focused. No dramatic tone. She wasn't grandstanding, and that made it worse. Trump stood, paced a few feet, then reached for his phone and started firing off posts on Truth Social. "Jasmine Crockett is lying on live TV. Fake documents, fake story, fake news." He posted again, then again, typing fast and furious, thumbs stabbing at the screen. "Total witch hunt. I never authorized any such transactions. Ask the banks. This is election interference." Back at the Capitol, the hearing paused briefly. Members began flipping through the documents. Staffers hustled in and out, whispering updates. Even those who came in skeptical were reading now. You could feel it. Something had shifted. Harlan Vexler whispered to another committee member, "She didn't leak this. She waited. She let us talk first." That was part of the strategy. Jasmine had received the documents 2 weeks earlier, but her team held on to them, verifying each one with outside counsel. She wanted it clean. No leaks, no missteps. When it came out, it had to be real and airtight. One of her staffers, an analyst from Toledo named Rhonda McNair, was the one who found the initial inconsistency between Trump's disclosures and the Bayfield wire transfers. She'd cross-referenced them with old business filings and noticed a small notation that didn't line up. That tiny red flag led to more digging and more subpoenas. And that led to the UAE transactions. Now it was all out in the open. Back in Bedminster, Trump was pacing again, on the phone with one of his lawyers. "She's lying, right? Tell me this is fake." The lawyer's voice was muffled through the speaker. "We need to review what she submitted. If it's real, we'll have to respond carefully. Filing something like that under oath carries legal weight." Trump cut him off. "No, we don't respond carefully. We punch back. I want you filing something today. Defamation, contempt, anything." The lawyer tried to calm him down. "Sir, if we escalate too fast and it's legitimate..." Trump hung up. Outside the club, cameras were already gathering. Journalists were getting word of Trump's meltdown and Jasmine's documents. Social media was catching fire. The hashtags were piling up. Hashtag Crockett receipts. Trump transactions. Hashtag oversight bombshell. But it wasn't just online noise. People were watching because something felt different this time. Not just accusations or shouting, but documents, hard numbers, names, emails. Crockett's timing had been perfect. Not only had she cornered the hearing room, she'd lit up every news cycle from coast to coast. In Detroit, a retired teacher named Marcus Langford watched it unfold on his tablet during lunch. He leaned over to his wife and said, "She might have just ended his run. That woman's not playing." In Spokane, a college student pulled out her phone and replayed the clip 3 times, mouth open. And in Phoenix, a former Republican campaign volunteer stared at the documents being displayed on screen and said out loud to no one, "That's not nothing." But Crockett wasn't focused on reactions. She was reviewing every word she'd said, making sure there was nothing they could twist. She knew the attacks were coming. She just didn't care. Her phone buzzed. CNN wanted her on in 2 hours, then MSNBC, then CBS. She gave them all the same answer. "I'll speak after the hearing. Let's finish what we started." But while the hearing was far from over, Trump's next move would only make things worse. Trump didn't just react, he exploded. Within 20 minutes of Jasmine Crockett submitting the documents, his inner circle at Bedminster had ballooned from 2 aides to a full table of loyalists, lawyers, and longtime confidants. Phones buzzed nonstop. The air inside the room was tense, and even the usual yes men started choosing their words carefully. No one wanted to be the target of one of his outbursts. Trump stood in the center of the room, glaring at a muted television screen showing Crockett's calm face beside the headline, "Breaking. Congresswoman releases Trump financial docs in hearing Bombshell." He whipped around and pointed to a former campaign strategist who hadn't spoken since arriving. "You knew this was coming?" The strategist blinked. "No, sir, she didn't leak a thing. Nobody had this. We didn't even hear a whisper." Trump's face went red. "That's the problem. She caught us sleeping. Everyone's too comfortable. This is war." He stormed over to the bar cart in the corner, poured a splash of Diet Coke into a crystal glass like it was scotch, and downed it. Across the room, his longtime attorney, Mitchell Gantz, sat quietly flipping through screenshots of Crockett's exhibit. His lips were tight. He didn't like what he saw. Some of this looks real, Gantz muttered. Trump spun around. What do you mean, looks real? Say it clear, Mitch. Mitchell hesitated, then looked up. I mean, these aren't fake PDFs from Reddit. The formatting matches real bank paperwork. Some of the signatures? I've seen them before. The room fell quiet. Trump didn't say anything for a moment. Then he jabbed a finger in Mitchell's direction. You fix this, or I'll find someone who can. Just then, one of the junior aides stepped in with a phone in hand. Mr. Trump, Fox won't put out a statement yet. They're holding back. They want more confirmation before they say anything on air. Of course they do, Trump snapped. Cowards. Every last one of them. Meanwhile, back in D.C., Jasmine sat silently while another committee member rambled on with a vague defense of the former president. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even look annoyed. She just waited. Her phone buzzed. Rhonda had texted, "He's blowing up on Truth Social. It's a circus over there." Another text came in. "Your folder is trending." She didn't smile, not even a little. This wasn't about going viral. It was about making sure the facts stood up on their own. Outside the Capitol, reporters were lining up. Everyone wanted a statement. But Jasmine had told them she wouldn't speak until the hearing ended. She wanted the record to show that she stayed in the room, that she didn't run to the cameras while the work was still unfinished. But Trump didn't wait. He grabbed his phone again. This Jasmine Crockett has clearly lost her mind. Fake documents from a corrupt committee that's rigged against me. They'll all be sued. Election interference. She should be investigated, not me. Another hoax. She will pay for this. Mark my words. It was ugly and reckless. His legal team knew it, but they couldn't stop him. The more Crockett stayed calm, the more Trump lost control. That evening, a reporter from KVOA in Tucson caught up with Gantz outside Bedminster. When asked if the president planned to formally dispute the documents, Gantz responded with a blank stare and said, "We're reviewing everything. That's all I can say." But inside, the team was panicking. Not because of what Jasmine said, but because of what she didn't say yet. See, there was a line near the end of her presentation that hadn't gotten much attention yet, but Gantz caught it. She had said, "And this is just the beginning. Additional records are in review and will be submitted under separate protective filing." That meant there was more. Trump didn't catch that line, but Gantz did, and now he was wondering what else Crockett had in her back pocket. He sent a quick text to a contact on the Hill. "Can you get a copy of what they didn't show today?" Back at Bedminster, Trump was still posting. "Maybe I'll show up to Congress myself, put her in her place." The idea shocked his team. "You can't go there," someone whispered. "You'll walk into a trap. She's got paper. You've got noise." But Trump wasn't listening. He paced the room, muttering to himself, firing off more posts, his breathing heavy. The more control Jasmine had over her tone, the more he lost control of his. But the real twist was that Jasmine hadn't even said the most damning thing yet. She was saving that for later. By early evening, you couldn't escape it. Jasmine Crockett's name was everywhere, across news banners, radio call-ins, TikTok stitches, and cable debates. Every major network replayed her 5-minute statement in full. People weren't just watching, they were studying her tone, rewinding the footage, freeze-framing the documents she laid out in front of the committee. In a Waffle House outside Mobile, Alabama, a group of truckers sat at the counter, phones tilted sideways, watching the hearing on someone's tablet. One of them, a big man in a faded ball cap, said, "She didn't even flinch. She had it all laid out, paperwork and everything." "She didn't scream," another replied. "She didn't grandstand. She just read it. That's what's scary." In the background, CNN played on the mounted TV above the jukebox. A chyron read, "Congresswoman Crockett reveals new Trump financial links." The conversation wasn't just happening in political circles. In barbershops in Tulsa, cafes in Reno, retirement homes in Sarasota, everyone had something to say about Jasmine Crockett. Some were skeptical, others stunned, but no one was ignoring it. She had become the name of the day. Meanwhile, Jasmine had finished her final comments for the hearing and was quietly walking out of the Capitol surrounded by staff. She declined all press on the way out, head down, lips tight. Not cold, just focused. Rhonda caught up to her at the top of the Capitol steps. "Do you realize what you just did?" Jasmine didn't stop walking. "We told the truth. That's all." "You don't get it," Rhonda insisted. "People are listening, really listening." Jasmine finally turned to her, stopping mid-step. "Then we better make sure we don't miss." Down the road, media vans were fighting for curb space. Camera crews huddled in the muggy heat. Everyone expected Jasmine to speak, but she didn't, not yet. She knew the documents would speak louder than her words right now. Back in Bedminster, Trump's outbursts had grown so frequent that 2 of his aides left early, claiming they had flights to catch. In truth, they just didn't want to be there when the fallout hit. He had calmed only slightly, just enough to meet with his digital team. "We need a video," he said. "Now." His media guy pulled out a phone. "You want to go live?" "No," Trump growled. "I want it sharp, quick. Me in front of the flag. Call her corrupt. Say she forged the docs. I want to drop it before she goes on CNN." He filmed it right there, standing in front of a backdrop in the hallway. He spoke with forced calmness, but anyone watching could see the tremble behind the smile. In the video, he called Jasmine a disgrace to Congress, accused her of fabricating evidence, and labeled the entire committee a left-wing ambush squad. It went live at 8:42 p.m. By 8:45, Crockett's team had already seen it. "He's scared," Rhonda said, holding the phone up. "This isn't control, this is panic." But Jasmine didn't respond to the video. Not yet. Instead, she sat down in her apartment a few blocks from the Hill and reviewed the remaining documents. Her kitchen table was covered in highlighted pages, sticky notes, and folders. No TV, no music, just her, the papers, and a pen. At 9:10 p.m., Anderson Cooper aired a panel segment about her statement. One of the analysts, a former DOJ prosecutor, raised an eyebrow after watching the clip. "I don't think people realize how dangerous this is for Trump," she said. "This isn't just rhetoric anymore. This is paperwork, signatures, transfers. If even half of that is legit, there's going to be fallout." Another panelist nodded. "She's forcing the country to look again, and this time without the shouting." The quiet clarity of Crockett's delivery was the most talked about detail of the day. No raised voice, no interruptions, just steady facts and a tone that felt harder to argue with than fire. Back in D.C., Rhonda looked at the time. "You still doing CNN tonight?" Jasmine shook her head. "Nope, I'm waiting till the morning. Let him stew in it overnight. Tomorrow, we speak." She picked up a page from the stack in front of her. This one wasn't part of the documents she submitted yet. It showed a dated memo referencing Trump's direct authorization of a property acquisition tied to a foreign developer. She didn't need to slam it on a table, just hold on to it, for now. But while the country was just beginning to process what they'd seen, Jasmine was already preparing the next strike. By sunrise, Washington was already buzzing, but not publicly. Behind tinted glass doors and inside phone-muted conference rooms, political aides, legal advisors, and nervous campaign consultants were scrambling. Trump's inner circle was split. Some pushed for silence, warning him that reacting too aggressively to Crockett's documents would backfire. Others, especially the ones closest to his media team, wanted full-force retaliation. Flood the internet, question the authenticity, spin the narrative. But Jasmine's move had thrown them off. She hadn't accused, she hadn't ranted, she just read facts, and facts were harder to smear than sound bites. Inside a closed-door meeting at a conservative PAC office in Arlington, 2 GOP strategists reviewed Jasmine's segment again, this time pausing to analyze each document shown on screen. "She's using their own paper trail against them," one of them muttered, "and doing it without a single raised eyebrow," the other added. "That's what makes it stick." Across town, in a private chamber inside the Capitol, a few Republican members of the Oversight Committee met quietly, without staff. Congressman Wexler sat at the head of the table, arms crossed. He looked exhausted. "She's baiting us," one congressman argued. "She wants us to come after her." "No," Wexler said quietly. "She's not baiting anybody. She knows we won't touch those documents because we can't." Silence. He continued. "They've been verified. You challenge that stuff, and it opens the door to discovery. You want to hand the Democrats more headlines?" The others shifted uncomfortably. They hated the position they were in. Defending Trump meant defending money trails they didn't understand, and possibly didn't want to. Meanwhile, in Jasmine's office, the atmosphere was focused but calm. Rhonda stood beside a dry erase board, scribbling down key names, dates, and gaps in the documents. Jasmine sat across the room, flipping through a binder thick with deposition notes. "We dropped the second batch Friday," she said without looking up. Rhonda stopped writing. "You sure?" "Let them stew. He's lashing out. We give the public space to process the first drop. Then we finish it." Her voice was steady, almost too steady. Just then, her chief of staff walked in, holding a phone. "It's CNN. They want a sit-down. Studio, not remote." Jasmine paused, then nodded. "Tomorrow, early." In another part of the city, Trump's attorney Mitchell Gantz was having a very different kind of conversation, with a retired former executive from the Trump organization. The man had been subpoenaed months ago, but hadn't been public since. "You're the reason she has this stuff, aren't you?" Gantz said bluntly, eyes locked on the older man across the diner table. The man didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee and said, "You guys left everything in the cloud. Thought deleting emails meant something." Gantz leaned in. "Do you have more?" The man smiled faintly. "You already know the answer." That same afternoon, Jasmine took a call from a former intelligence analyst who had reached out through a mutual contact. He didn't give a name, only a warning. "Watch your back," he said. "This stuff goes deep. Some of these accounts you're tracing, they weren't just business. They were tied to diplomatic arrangements. You're knocking on doors that go past politics." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then let them open." After the call, she finally exhaled, just for a second. Later that evening, she met privately with Congressman Devin Marks, a longtime friend from Ohio who'd stayed neutral for most of the Trump saga. "You've got them cornered," he said. "They won't say it, but I've seen it in the hallways. They're scared." Jasmine leaned forward. "They should be. But this isn't about fear. It's about making people understand that this government can't be sold piece by piece." Devin nodded slowly. "You're going to make enemies." "I already have," she replied. "But if we stop now, what was the point?" Back in Bedminster, Trump sat alone in his private study, staring at a screen full of talking heads, none of whom were defending him with the urgency he wanted. He switched channels, scrolled through his phone, slammed it down, then picked it up again. He opened the folder labeled Crockett, filled with screenshots, articles, social media posts, and mentions of people tied to her. He tapped the desk. "Find me something," he told his assistant. "Anything." But the more they searched for dirt on her, the more it became clear. She had done her homework, and they were playing catch-up. The next morning, Jasmine Crockett sat in the CNN studio under soft lights, wearing a navy blazer and no jewelry, except for a simple gold band on her right hand. The anchor welcomed her with a practiced smile, but there was an edge in her voice, like she knew this wasn't going to be just another segment. "You've made national headlines overnight," the anchor began. "Some are calling this the most significant financial revelation tied to former President Trump since the Manhattan DA case. You submitted the documents, Congresswoman. Are you prepared for the blowback?" Jasmine gave a half smile, not out of amusement, but because she had been asked that same question a dozen times already. "I didn't submit those documents for headlines," she said. "I submitted them because they needed to be part of the record. If that's uncomfortable for some people, that's not my problem." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't blink. The anchor leaned forward. "Former President Trump has already called you a liar multiple times on social media. He's hinted at lawsuits, even criminal action against you. Are you worried?" Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "Look," she said, "I've read his threats. I've watched his videos. But you know what I haven't seen? A denial backed by evidence. If he wants to dispute the documents, I invite him to provide his own. Until then, I'm not interested in social media tantrums." Back at Bedminster, Trump was watching the interview live, seated with a half-eaten muffin and his phone in his hand. He turned to Gantz. "She's mocking me on national TV." Gantz nodded slowly. "And she's not doing it with insults. That's what makes it dangerous." Trump groaned and looked at his phone. "Nobody fights like this. They yell. She just talks." Gantz didn't respond. He already knew the difference mattered. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued, "What I brought to that hearing wasn't opinion. It was paperwork. It had timestamps, signatures, transaction codes. It wasn't my story. It was his. All I did was make sure the public got to read it." The segment ended with a standing request. CNN wanted her back next week. Jasmine agreed, but only after confirming the Oversight Committee would resume first. Back in her DC office, Rhonda was fielding calls from every major outlet, NBC, PBS, The Hill. Everyone wanted a piece of her time. But Jasmine stayed selective. She knew overexposure could dilute her message. That afternoon, a group of protesters gathered outside the Capitol holding handmade signs. Most were supportive. One read, "Paper over politics." Another, "Crockett's got receipts." Still, mixed in the crowd were a few with darker messages. Trump loyalists had shown up too, filming live streams and shouting accusations of fraud. Security had been increased around Jasmine's office. She didn't ask for it, but she didn't argue either. Inside, she reviewed the second batch of documents with Rhonda. This set was even more explosive. Internal communications between Trump's overseas contacts and domestic advisors, referencing real estate acquisitions in exchange for favorable diplomatic consideration. "This email right here," Jasmine said, tapping the page, "it literally says, He's aware this favor guarantees our future project approvals. Rhonda looked stunned. He was bargaining policy for business. Jasmine nodded. That's the line. That's what people have to see. She wasn't just trying to hurt Trump. She was trying to pull the curtain back on how politics had been turned into a personal marketplace. That evening, she recorded a short video message. Nothing flashy, no production crew, just her, a phone, and a plain background. I didn't get into public service to become part of the circus, she said, but I also didn't get into it to stay silent when the people I serve are being misled. It was short, under 90 seconds. But by midnight, it had been viewed nearly 4 million times. People responded to the calm in her voice, the way she didn't try to win them over with outrage. She laid the facts on the table and let them speak. In Omaha, a high school civics teacher played her testimony in class and asked his students what made it different. She sounded like she was talking to adults, one student said. In Tampa, a podcast host who'd built his brand on political skepticism played the audio and simply said, "Whether you like her or not, this isn't someone you can dismiss." And in Salt Lake City, a retired Army colonel turned to his wife after watching the clip and said, "She doesn't blink." But while the public leaned in closer, Jasmine was getting ready to deliver something even harder to ignore. The memo that tied it all together. By Thursday morning, the memo had become a ghost. Everyone in Trump's camp was chasing, but no one could find. Whispers about its existence had made their way into legal chat rooms, political newsletters, even breakfast meetings in Arlington and Scottsdale. No one had seen it, but everyone was nervous about what it might say. Inside a glass-walled conference room at a conservative law firm in Dallas, 3 Trump-aligned attorneys sat around a long oak table poring over screenshots of Jasmine's earlier submissions. "She's not bluffing," one said flatly. "You don't use language like protective filing unless there's a plan. She's waiting for something, timing or leverage." Another replied, "We need to force her hand, file a motion to demand the full record now, catch her before she chooses when to strike." But Trump didn't like that idea. When they brought it up to him later that afternoon, he shut it down immediately. "No, we don't ask for anything. That makes it look like we're scared." They exchanged glances. One of them, a younger attorney from St. George, Utah, finally said what no one else wanted to say out loud. "You are scared, sir, and we should be. There's language in those documents that could be interpreted as a direct quid pro quo. If this memo does what we think it does, it's going to be harder and harder to claim this was just sloppy bookkeeping." Trump's expression hardened. "You don't work for Jasmine Crockett. You work for me. So start acting like it." The damage control plan moved forward anyway, without his blessing. Quietly, carefully, a group of legal strategists began reviewing every speech, interview, and memo Trump had produced during the years mentioned in Jasmine's timeline. They weren't looking for proof of guilt. They were looking for contradictions, statements that would now clash with the evidence. And there were plenty. Meanwhile, in D.C., Jasmine walked through the Rayburn building with the second folder tucked under her arm. She didn't rush. She didn't try to hide it. Her team knew every camera in the hallway was watching. She entered a closed-door committee prep session. Her chair recognized the folder immediately. "You're submitting more?" Jasmine nodded once. "Tomorrow morning. It's ready." He hesitated. "You know this will set off the next fire." "I'm not in the business of waiting for approval," she said. "Let the fire come." That night, news outlets reported a leaked tip. A new set of documents from Congresswoman Crockett would be submitted within 24 hours and may include direct evidence of policy manipulation for financial gain. It was the sentence that sent the GOP war room into overdrive. At Bedminster, Trump snapped when he heard the phrase on a Fox News panel. Policy manipulation? That's what they're going with? His advisor tried to calm him. "They don't have the memo. They're speculating." "But now it's out there," Trump barked. "Doesn't matter what they have. The media will run it like gospel." He stood up and paced. "I want a counterpunch." The room froze. "Get me something on her," he said. "Something ugly." One of the aides pulled out a file, half prepared, filled with social media posts, quotes from old interviews, and photos from protest events. "We've got this. Not much, but maybe enough to stir a little doubt." Trump skimmed it. "Run it." Within hours, a series of anonymous Twitter accounts started posting old clips of Jasmine at rallies, taking her words out of context. One clip was labeled, "Radical Crockett wants to tear down America." It trended briefly, but fizzled by morning. Why? because Jasmine had already responded the night before, quietly, without drama. She posted a single line. "This is what desperation looks like. I'll be in the hearing room tomorrow, with more receipts." It got 6.4 million views overnight. The damage control strategy wasn't working. In fact, it was feeding the very narrative Jasmine had warned about, that truth was inconvenient only to those who had something to hide. Inside her office, Rhonda sat beside the printer, watching the last page of the memo slide out. She read it, then looked up. "This one's different." Jasmine nodded. "It ties everything together," she said. "Names, meetings, outcomes, no more gaps." But if they thought the documents were damning, the memo would tear the last curtain down, and no one would be able to look away. Friday morning began like a slow drumbeat. No loud bangs, just a rising tension humming through newsrooms, airports, group chats, and government buildings. Everyone had the same question. What's in the memo? By 8:15 a.m., Jasmine Crockett walked through the Capitol, calm and unguarded, holding the now infamous beige folder that reporters had been speculating about for 2 days. This time, there was no effort to keep it out of view. She wanted them to see it. Outside, reporters shouted her name. "Congresswoman Crockett, can you confirm the memo involves foreign governments?" She didn't break stride. "You'll see it when it hits the record." The memo landed at 9:02 a.m. It was immediately submitted to the Oversight Committee as an official exhibit and handed to every member present. It was titled plainly, "Foreign Interests and Presidential Profit, Communications and Directives, 2017 to 2020. Inside, over 24 emails and memos linked internal conversations from Trump's former advisors to direct property deals involving a foreign development firm operating in Doha. The memo highlighted one specific directive, handwritten by Trump, authorizing expedited approval of a trade incentive package right after a major deposit hit Bayfield Assets account. The deposit amount, $4.6 million. The date, 3 days before the policy announcement. CNN broke it first. MSNBC followed. Then the Wall Street Journal posted a headline that no one expected to read so soon. Memo suggests direct link between Trump White House decision and personal financial gain. Within hours, the reaction turned. In Baton Rouge, a conservative radio host who once mocked oversight hearings opened his morning segment with a surprising tone. "I still lean right. I voted for Trump twice, but if that memo's real, and it looks like it is, then we've got a problem bigger than party loyalty." On Reddit and Facebook, screenshots from the memo spread like wildfire. People weren't just reacting, they were dissecting. "He wrote it by hand," one comment read. "That's not denial material, that's a smoking gun." In a coffee shop in Springfield, Missouri, a young woman stared at the headline on her tablet and turned to her mother. "Why didn't anyone else do this before?" Her mom just shook her head. "Because they were afraid." And in Wilmington, Delaware, a retired accountant uploaded a 6-minute video explaining exactly how the transfers matched a pattern he'd seen in private sector fraud cases. The video hit 800,000 views in less than 12 hours. But it wasn't just regular people shifting. On the Hill, 3 moderate Republicans quietly reached out to Jasmine's office. They didn't offer public support, but they asked for access to the full documentation. One of them, a senator from Arizona, said privately, "I just want to know what's true. That's it." Rhonda caught the shift almost immediately. "The energy's different today," she said as she sorted press requests. "They're not mocking anymore. They're asking questions." Jasmine didn't say much. She just looked through a copy of the memo one more time, careful, scanning every line again just to be sure. Trump, meanwhile, was furious. He hadn't expected Crockett to pull off this level of pressure. He thought she'd flame out after the first hearing. He hadn't counted on her patience, her precision, her refusal to flinch. In a closed call with advisors, he shouted, "We've got to get ahead of this. We can't let this be the story for the weekend." One aide suggested holding a surprise rally in Pennsylvania. Another wanted to release a real version of the memo, accusing Crockett of doctoring the file. But Gantz, now more subdued than ever, shook his head. "If we fake a memo and she produces a signed original, we're finished. Worse than finished." By 2 p.m., Trump's own campaign team was fielding calls from donors asking pointed questions. Is this true? Was this approved by the White House? Should I still be backing this? Some didn't wait for answers. They froze donations. The memo was hitting harder than anyone expected because it didn't rely on adjectives or accusations. It used names, transaction IDs, handwritten notes. It wasn't crafted for drama. It was built for court. That night, Jasmine sat in her apartment eating leftovers with Rhonda. They didn't talk much. The room was quiet. Phones kept buzzing, but they ignored them for a few minutes. Finally, Rhonda said, "You think he'll go silent now?" Jasmine shook her head slowly. "No, he'll come louder. But this time, fewer people will follow." But just when it seemed like the momentum had crested, one last revelation turned everything from controversy to consequence. The hearing resumed the following Monday. The room was fuller than usual. Extra chairs had been brought in, and a few aides had to stand against the back wall. Cameras lined the perimeter, the red lights blinking quietly as members of Congress shuffled through papers and clicked open pens. Jasmine Crockett sat near the center, her posture unshaken, a single manila envelope resting on the table before her. This wasn't the same room from last week. The air had changed. Fewer jokes, fewer side comments. More eyes stayed fixed on her, waiting. The chair tapped the gavel once. "Congresswoman Crockett, you requested time to make a final submission." Jasmine nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Chair." She opened the envelope and pulled out one page. Just one. No stack, no binder. A single printed sheet. "Members of this committee," she began, "last week, we reviewed documents that included financial transfers, internal memos, and a recently uncovered directive signed by Mr. Trump. Today, I'm submitting an additional document, a sworn affidavit from a former Trump Organization legal advisor." She held it up for a moment. "This affidavit confirms the existence of internal discussions in which foreign policy decisions were evaluated not by their benefit to the country, but by their potential to increase personal profit." The room held still. She read from the document. The then president directly inquired whether expedited approval of Project Al Mirage in Qatar would benefit Bayfield assets. After being advised that the connection would be clear on paper, the approval was delayed by 1 week, allowing a shell corporation to purchase intermediary holdings. The room didn't gasp. It didn't need to. That one line said it all. A deliberate pause in foreign policy to rearrange financial interests. A week. It wasn't the amount. It was the intent. And now it was signed and sworn. Jasmine continued. "This affidavit is accompanied by a time-stamped email chain and a conference call record that matches the internal calendar of Trump Organization executives." She paused. "The former advisor, whose name is redacted here for protection, has agreed to testify under protective order if necessary." Across the table, Harland Wexler shifted in his seat, arms folded tighter than before. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking down. The chair cleared his throat. "We'll move to receive the document into the record. Do you have further comments, Congresswoman?" Jasmine leaned in slightly, her tone steady. "This is no longer a matter of political rivalry or party loyalty. It is a matter of ethics, of whether we, as elected officials, are willing to hold power accountable when it acts in self-interest over public duty." She paused again, not for effect, just for breath. "The American people deserve to know that the laws apply to everyone. No exceptions, no offices too high." And with that, she yielded her time. The chair nodded. So noted. Outside the room, journalists had already begun typing. They didn't need to wait for the transcript. The word affidavit was enough to fuel 3 days of headlines. Within hours, the document was published by multiple outlets, its redactions intact, but its content unmissable. That evening, 60 Minutes ran a 10-minute segment on the hearing, focusing on Crockett's submissions and the potential legal consequences. A constitutional law professor from Ohio State spoke plainly. "This isn't politics. This is legal exposure. When a sitting president pauses international action to secure a personal financial advantage, it crosses lines we have very clear language for." In suburban Fort Collins, a middle-aged father of 3 who rarely watched the news sat at his kitchen table, reading the summary on his phone. He scrolled, stopped, then looked across the table at his wife. "Do you think she's going to keep going?" His wife nodded. "She didn't come this far to back off now." And she didn't. Jasmine refused every late-night request for comment, but issued one short statement through her press secretary. "We will let the record speak. The truth has waited long enough." Trump, on the other hand, did not stay silent. That night, he went live from Mar-a-Lago, standing behind a podium draped in American flags. His voice was sharp, pacing erratic, and language filled with bitterness. "They are trying to erase your voice by targeting me," he said. "They want to silence all of us by putting this radical on a pedestal." But even in the room, something felt off. His usual fire didn't land. Some of his allies clapped, but others just watched. A reporter later described it as a speech aimed at a crowd that had already moved on. But Jasmine wasn't interested in silencing anyone. She was about to speak louder than ever. By the following week, the story had seeped into places where political drama rarely lingered. Grocery store conversations, PTA meetings, even Sunday sermons in small-town churches. Not because it was sensational, but because it felt undeniable. Quiet, methodical, real. For every accusation flung her way, Jasmine Crockett answered with evidence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pivot to talking points. She simply delivered what had been missing for years: clarity. The Oversight Committee's inbox was flooded. Letters, voicemails, messages from veterans, pastors, nurses, retired city clerks, all thanking her. Not for taking down Trump, but for refusing to blink, for standing still while everyone else shouted. The hearing room that Friday was smaller. No cameras this time, no press, just committee members behind closed doors reviewing the affidavit and deciding what came next. The chair, tired and stern, addressed the group. "We're at a fork," he said. "If we send this forward to justice, we're saying there are grounds for investigation. If we don't, we're saying money and power can still buy silence." The room was quiet. A few members looked at Jasmine. She didn't flinch. Vexler, seated across from her, finally spoke. "I don't like how this got here. I hate that we're even talking about it. But I read every page, and if I saw this on someone from our side of the aisle, I'd say the same thing." He looked directly at her. "You didn't come here swinging. You just brought the fire with the facts." The vote was taken. 8 in favor, 4 against, 1 abstained. The motion to refer the evidence to the Department of Justice passed. That night, Jasmine stood in her kitchen with a glass of water and Rhonda nearby, scrolling through her phone. "They're calling it the turning point," Rhonda said. "Some folks are saying you'll be on a VP shortlist next year." Jasmine shook her head. "I'm not doing this for titles." Rhonda smiled. "Yeah, but people notice when someone does the hard thing without wanting a crown." Across the country, cable networks held panel discussions analyzing the memo line by line. Legal experts weighed in. Law professors broke it down for viewers in plain terms. And social media, often full of noise, had settled into something else: focus. In Topeka, a grandmother who'd never used Twitter in her life signed up just to tweet, "Jasmine Crockett is what integrity looks like." In Boise, a city council candidate changed the tagline on her campaign flyers to read, "No shortcuts, no lies, just Crockett-style truth." And in a diner outside Albuquerque, 2 Vietnam veterans sipped coffee while watching Crockett's original 5-minute hearing clip on a phone. "You believe her?" one asked. The other nodded slowly. "She didn't blink. That's all I needed." Meanwhile, Trump's team had gone quiet. No new rallies, no pressers, just silence and back-channel discussions with attorneys. They knew the DOJ referral was serious, not a conviction, but a door, and behind it, subpoenas, testimony, and investigators with time and resources. Inside Mar-a-Lago, Trump asked a question few around him had ever heard him ask. "Do you think she beat me?" No one answered, because deep down, they already knew. But Jasmine didn't see this as a win. She saw it as a beginning. In her first public address since the vote, she stood on the Capitol steps, not surrounded by politicians, but by interns, aides, and junior staffers who had worked through the nights to help her get it right. She faced the cameras and said, "This was never about revenge. It was never about scoring a headline. It was about doing what so many before us were too scared or too tired to do: speak the truth, plainly, and without apology." She continued, "We live in a time when people will doubt what they hear, question what they see, and even dismiss what they read, if it threatens their comfort. But the truth doesn't ask for your comfort. It just sits there waiting to be acknowledged." Her voice was firm but not angry. "I know what it costs to tell the truth, but I also know what it costs when we don't." She stepped back. No slogans, no hand-raising, just facts left ringing in the air. That video reached more than 50 million views in a week. It didn't trend because it was flashy. It trended because people were ready for someone who didn't talk in circles. And as the DOJ began quietly scheduling preliminary interviews, as members of the committee began issuing formal summaries of their findings, Jasmine Crockett returned to her desk with the same folder she'd started with, now dog-eared and worn. Inside it, the same documents, the ones she said she'd let speak for themselves. Because truth, when spoken calmly and without fear, doesn't fade. It echoes. If you believe truth still matters, even when it makes people uncomfortable, subscribe and stay with us, because more stories like this one are coming.